Tonight on This Week in Mad Men, Jon Hamm makes his directorial debut, Betty packs on a couple LBs, Peggy has to hire someone with a penis, and Don investigates how Brian Jones makes girls feel. All that and more on the show that's always had a Jew, thereby making it more modern. It's This Week in Mad Men. Welcome to This Week in Mad Men, and we're experimenting with our own product placement this week. Amazing show. We're going to jump right in. My name is Lon Harris. I will be your host. Joining me are my co-hosts for this week. To my immediate left, Ms. Jamie Foxx. To her immediate left, Ms. Janie Haddad. And to her immediate left, Ms. Starlee Kine, who is writing a column for CapitalNewYork.com about Mad Men. So you've come to the right place for a thorough and in-depth discussion.
I'm glad it's not like an Everybody Loves Raymond discussion.
Yes, that would be inconvenient.
And also, we would need a time machine.
Right, because we could be going through the box set. We could be like halfway through season 2 on the Raymond box.
AD Club recaps canceled. Shows that are off there. It's a thing.
Really, they're digging through Firefly even as we speak. So there's a lot to talk about. We will just jump into this week's episode of Mad Men. It was on last night. It was called Tea Leaves. Kind of an obvious. Usually the episode titles are a little like sort of cleverer in a way, and this one was very sort of an obvious reference, which I guess maybe some of our panelists feel like was kind of the staple of the entire show last night, that it was a little on the nose, a little obvious. We were talking before the show. In some ways, I think it felt like the first regular episode of the season. Like we had those 2 starter episodes, and they were kind of just, here's where everybody is, and here's kind of setting everything up, and now we had the first like regular episode of the season where there's just kind of like a self-contained plot line. Lots of stories that were introduced that will sort of probably carry us through the season that we'll have to talk about. But to start off, like, what was everybody's thoughts on the episode as a whole? And did you guys feel like there was too much Betty, which seemed to be a common internet complaint?
I don't feel like there was too much Betty. I mean, because we didn't see her at all.
There was a lot of Betty.
There was a lot of Betty, though.
In all ways, there was a lot of Betty.
There's too much Betty.
There's too much of Betty.
I didn't know that you meant.
Yeah,
right.
A little bit of both.
I get it. In my personal opinion, it wasn't my favorite episode. I'm just going to throw it out there. That might be controversial in the blogosphere to say, but I didn't think it was too much Betty. I'm actually glad that they found a way to weave Betty back into the storyline, because I think her character is pretty integral to, sort of setting up what's going on in the time period and Don's life. I mean, she's obviously a major figure.
We have a lot of questions about Don and his marriage, and that's right. Plays a lot into it.
So I didn't think it was too much Betty, but it wasn't my favorite episode for various reasons that we'll get into, obviously. But that was not my criticism.
Yeah, it's not. I feel like it's not. I feel like it's not like a problem to have too much of one character. And like, I've never wanted to phase Betty out of the show. I feel like it was kind of just a gimmick episode. I actually don't feel like it was the real episode, because to me, this episode I feel like will go down in history as actually being totally disposable, because I don't think we'll ever see Fat Betty again. And so to me, last week actually felt like definitely setting the tone of what the season's about, which is aging and time and everyone feeling like irrelevant. And this one I know is also about Betty feeling like that, but I just am so not convinced that fat suit is here to stay. And so I feel like my major problem was I don't mind seeing Betty aging. I like seeing Betty aging, but the idea of not committing to the fat suit, which I think is going to happen, makes me not take it seriously.
Yeah. We should talk about this, because according to the writers and everything that was written, this was filmed when January Jones was actually pregnant, so that explains why they had to kind of do something with her.
But she wasn't that fat.
Exactly.
Like, obviously,
clearly they had makeup to give her, especially in the jowls.
She had prosthetic chin or something, right?
Yeah, and I thought it was a little distracting. I mean, you always kind of with TV, and especially Mad Men when they've done this before, the aging makeup's never...
But I disagree. I find Fat Peggy one of the greatest creations on television, and I really think Fat Peggy is a masterpiece, because you didn't know what was going on. They totally made it subtle. It was so dramatic, and like the fact that you look back and wow, and now it seems so obvious that she was pregnant. You had no idea. You really were just like, is the actress getting fat? Is the character getting fat? Is this what's going on? And pregnant was kind of like the last thing that you were guessing, and it was really, really. I've gone back and watched it, and the way they form, like make her arms bigger and they make everything bust, is so good. And this felt like a fat suit.
Yeah, that was gradual too, which I think helped them. And even characters would have like, at first it was just little digs or little like, oh, maybe a few less lunches, and it had like
dress and
it had the season to
It was
develop.
so
whereas
weird
this one was,
too. It was such a weird thing to watch.
Right.
Because it wasn't the main plot of the show.
And it was a new character then. I mean, it was
so
you're
good.
just getting to know her, and all of a sudden this is happening to her. Whereas this episode, even just the first shot is Betty can't zip up her dress,
and she's just so big.
Like, she's all of a
like
sudden,
I understand that
very
like women, I do think you thicken up, but like, or some women thicken up, but I think it seemed too much.
Well, like only a year had passed or something
7 months.
since some
yeah, it
months
was
since
October,
last.
and now we're in July.
Yeah.
presumably
And
'cause
she
we saw
was
them
like
celebrate
a
it before.
beauty queen when she I mean, like, so it was a very drastic.
And I also feel like like the character of Betty would not let it go that far.
Well,
Like,
she was having trouble reducing.
I know, but even though like I know how she's like depressed she is and she wasn't happy and she mentioned that to Don, but I don't think like she she still wanted to be a model like back in season 1. Like I don't think she would have let it get that badly.
She suddenly developed food issues. She's eating
yeah.
bugels on the couch, and then the closing
Which
shot
is
with
already
the ice
what
cream.
Pete Campbell's wife has. We already actually are dealing with that because last week it was showing Pete Campbell's wife eating the cereal and out of the box and not getting dressed. And she actually seems more like the depressed wife at home who doesn't know what to do in the suburbs. Betty, like the modern day version of Betty, is like on the elliptical every day.
Right.
Like all she is doing is
In full
working
makeup.
out. And yeah.
Right.
And so I just feel like it did not really track.
I also thought it was odd with the Betty storyline that they would recycle sort of the cancer thing, like with Anna Draper having cancer, and then she's having this cancer scare. But then we were talking too, Starlee and I were saying how they didn't necessarily, there was no whiff of the Anna Draper.
Right. I
Or
mean,
did you find that
Well,
there were...
I had in my notes that it has this impact on Don, and he's very fatalistic about it. That he's telling Roger before Betty's even gotten back to him, like, Betty has cancer. And so maybe...
But I didn't pick up on the Anna thing. Like, I didn't even remember Anna had the cancer until Janie told me, and I feel like that was definitely not communicated from Don, that he was thinking about somebody else.
It definitely was not brought up or dealt with in the context of this episode.
Even like the underlying, I felt like they didn't have to have him like flash to a picture of Anna on his desk or anything.
Yeah.
But something was missing from like how he was reacting. I felt.
I think that's fair. That may have been the decision making, was like, would it be too on the nose or too cheesy to have an actual reference to it? So I sort of had it in the back of my mind. But yeah, it definitely was not called out specifically that Don just went through a cancer scare with somebody else.
Not a cancer
months ago.
scare, like a death. Like she
Right.
actually, it was like the reason to be
Yeah,
scared.
she succumbed. So I did think the one thing I really did like about the Betty storyline this week was her initial visit to the doctor, where I felt like they were intentionally doing a bit of like misdirection, like keeping you guessing. We're so ready to assume the worst about Betty in a lot of ways, and so she goes to the doctor. She's asking for diet pills. She wants this quick, easy fix. She can't deal with the reality of her situation. It's kind of just like, oh, I can't have trouble dropping. And even the doctor at one point is basically calls her on. That this isn't really like a problem, and it's all in her head. This is a psychological, it's psychosomatic. There's nothing really wrong with you. Everything until they find that lump, and then all of a sudden you're confronted with, maybe there is really something wrong. Maybe this is the first time there's actually.
I actually felt like the whole sickness thing though was a distraction. I was so much more into the idea of just watching like Betty dealing with not being pretty anymore. It's so much. It's more interesting to me. Because she also doesn't ultimately have cancer, so I was
Right, exactly.
I was
You know
actually
that she's
bummed
not
out
gonna
because I was
come
like,
off.
Betty being a fading beauty is forcing them to like her character to go in another direction, and the whole season is about aging, and obviously that's what they're telling us over and over again, and so it just seemed like
They're
kind of a
really pounding
cop
it.
out to me to all of a sudden be like, and then the cancer scare plot,
Yeah.
and she's clearly I think going to become a speed freak next.
That's what they keep hinting.
Yeah, well,
towards.
the diet pills thing.
She's not staying in the fat suit like that. There's no way January Jones would sign on. I
So they're
feel.
gonna do like I'm dancing as fast as I can.
Yeah.
They're gonna do that. They're gonna throw that storyline at Betty. Maybe. I mean, I felt like looking back on the episode, it seems like they brought up the cancer thing just as a way to establish what I think is probably going to be one of the ongoing plot lines, which is she and Don still have this connection that neither Don doesn't have it with Megan, she doesn't have it with Henry. They only have it with each other, and they have that sort of tender phone call where he calls her Birdie for the first time since they were together, at least on the show.
And she was the first person that he called. Excuse me. Yeah, he was the first person that she called when she couldn't find her husband.
She can't find Henry, so immediately she thinks to call him. And there was even other nods to everything these characters have been through, like say that thing you always say, everything's going to be okay. So it's just hinting at the history that these two have that they don't have with their respective spouses. And they're also clearly layering in both Megan and Henry hate it when Don and Betty speak or interact. Henry's brusque with Don on the phone and basically hangs up on him. And Megan, of course, does not like it whenever Betty's name comes up at all. And even Betty, there was that one moment I wanted to mention where she refers to Megan as Don's girlfriend, and then has to remind herself, they're married now.
Right.
So
I thought it, going back to when she's at the doctor, when the doctor says, he says, "Oh, you're middle-aged now," or something like that's a problem with middle-aged women. When she's like still in her 20s, isn't she still like 28 or 9?
No,
or
she's in her 30s. I mean, Betty's definitely in her.
But like.
No, I don't think Betty's that much younger than Don. I feel like how much younger did she? Like 4 years younger, probably. How?
I think in the first season she was like late 20s.
In her first season.
So and that's been what 6 years? 6 years.
So she's in her 30s.
Yeah, she's like early 30s.
Yeah, I mean, well, even if you think about the flashback episode where Don was pretty young when they hooked up. I mean, he was like still a fur salesman when they started dating for the flashback episode. So yeah,
but he's definitely older.
He's older than her, but the age gulf for them is not as stark as it is from him and.
I don't find the age gulf between him and Megan that stark either. Once I realized that Megan's 26, I'm like, it seems normal. Like I feel like when I first said she was 20 in this episode, when like and that made more
that's according
sense.
To Betty, yeah.
I know, but like her being 26 to me feels like 26 is like done in that era, and it doesn't seem like 40 and 26 is not that scandalous. I was a little disappointed by Megan's age reveal. It really was.
I was, but I'm still like stuck on the Betty thing. I'm sorry, but
well, I got a few more.
We got some more Betty stuff.
There's a lot of Betty to talk about.
There's really only 3 main plot lines this time. There's Betty. There's Michael Ginsberg, the new office Jew,
the new copywriter,
and then the Rolling Stones and Heinz Beans.
Yes, that's true.
We really don't have as much to cover this week.
But what I found startling about the episode with the Betty storyline is that even though they did have that tender conversation where he says everything is going to be okay, it still feels to me like there's no one in Betty's life who cares about Betty. Nobody cares about her. Like she, even though he said everything's going to be okay because she asked him to say that, he's still like, well, what am I going to do about the kids? Like, like it's all sort of like she's this disposable person, and it was very sad. Because even Henry, he tries to be a good husband, but she's still just, this possession that he wanted, that he earned.
Take care of.
That's right. And to me, it was so haunting, where she has this life-threatening scare, and there's really nobody. And then she asks her friend, what's it like? She's like, it's like swimming on the ocean and no one's there to hear your screams, or whatever that monologue was, which was so
I didn't love that monologue.
Sad. But I mean, but that's how Betty's life is anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think
that's why I think she didn't relate to it, because she was saying that, and then she's like, oh, but I'm just gonna get fat, because I think her normal life is so. That is her everyday life.
That's her everyday life.
It's isolated to begin with.
That's it already. I mean, like, she's already living that reality.
And and I mean, I think that's one thing that she's starting to realize, that she's always been, very in the moment kind of thinking, and now she's realizing, like, I really don't have a legacy.
There's mortality.
And when she looked at even like what would happen when she's gone, it's really like, oh well, Pauline and Megan will raise my kids and they'll never hear a nice thing about me again.
They won't say anything nice.
But that's it. She really doesn't have. She won't.
She has no
anything.
legacy. And there was a moment where I thought this was her wake-up call, where she was gonna actually like forge her own identity, and then she just ate the ice cream at the end. And I was like,
and I do like her having to be with that woman. I loved it when she saw that lady in the doctor's office, because I loved that it was like, Betty used to be too pretty to used to look down on this woman, and now Betty is like this invisible. As extreme as I find the makeup to be, I love the idea of someone going from being a story about someone being very pretty to being just invisible,
just
an ordinary person. And I think it's an interesting topic to tackle, and I do think like her having to sit with that woman. She was probably nicer to that woman than she's probably ever been.
Yeah.
And she wasn't just preening the whole time, because she actually had to listen to her and be like, I'm like you. I'm less than you. And your kids probably love you, and mine.
That's true.
Yeah. And
it was an interesting.
Yeah, that is. And yeah, I felt like the end of the episode was a little cruel to her. And the show has been cruel to Betty on many occasions, but having her so quickly, I mean, she gets the phone call that she doesn't have cancer, and she's not even given like one line of dialogue of relief before just reverting right back to.
And that was definitely intentional.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, your mother's obese, and she's immediately turning it around.
Well, not only that, she was like, I mean, basically, she was like, I'm not sure if it's worth living if I'm going to be fat. Like, she wasn't completely overjoyed about staying alive, because now she has to not be pretty. And which I actually do think is a real problem in her life. Like, I don't fault, like, her as a character feeling terrible about not being pretty. I also think they set up that Sunday thing is just to do the diet pill thing, though. Like, I think
really
Sally's going to become anorexic. I mean, Sally didn't finish hers.
I said that from last season, remember?
Yeah.
I thought Sally was going to become anorexic.
We're getting into eating disorder decade territory, and I think I think they did something. There was a different intention when she gets the phone call about not having cancer than the Sunday thing. I think the Sunday thing was about a whole different.
That's setting up.
Yes.
The
That's what I thought.
The coming weeks. Yeah. That's interesting, because I didn't really even think of the significance of Sally not finishing her Sunday. More the significance of that shot of Betty, like, well, here we go, pulling it over.
Also, last season too, remember, she was always like pushing her food around the plate, never eating it.
Yeah, that's true. And also, there was a lot of pressure on her to be pretty and skinny, like that she would say things that her mom echoed to her, to Sally, like, you know.
Yeah.
I don't remember specifically, but there were things.
Oh, when she cut her hair and stuff. Like
yes.
that.
Right. Well, right. It was about, you know,
physical
her appearance and being pretty, and
yes.
that's how you get accepted. And that's basically all Betty has to teach her children in some ways. Two more things real quick I want to deal with Betty, and then we'll move on. One is, what did you guys? I'm usually willing to give a little bit of dramatic license a pass. It's a TV show, you know, you got to let it pack it in. But having a psychic come over to their table while two characters are sitting there, to me felt a little too much for me to accept.
Wasn't it like a tea room, though?
It was a tea room, but it was, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and in New York in the 60s at a tea room, that would be a regular thing that happened, and I'm just ill-informed. And I looked it up, and I didn't find anything.
You didn't find anything?
I looked up, like, psychic New York tea room.
I mean, she was like a tea reader. I feel like it was plausible that if you were in, like, one of those, like, New York kind of hotels, so that would be, like, a gimmicky thing that they would have. But I did think it was too...
Plays a bit like a screenwriter's contrivance. Like, well, I gotta bring some of these issues in.
So then, like, the title of the episode makes sense.
Yeah. Sort of well, and just the whole idea of, you know, so this woman can tell her, oh, you're a rock, and you've had people who love you, so you can get her expression where she's realizing that none of this is true.
I know. I felt it was like this more than a lot of episode had more explicit screenwriter tricks. So like even that, like when the dream was ineffective to me, but I feel like even that, like, say what you always say thing is such a classic. That they always say that in movies, and then it was such a letdown where he's like, "You mean it's gonna be okay?" Like, it wasn't. That's not delivering anything. And I felt like her setting it up that way, say that you always say, just felt like somebody. No offense to, I know Target write these things, but this one felt like I could see the writing.
I definitely think you could feel the hand of the screenwriter on this episode more than an average episode. And yeah, the dream was the other part I was going to be like, that's a little on the nose. And I know Weiner started off on The Sopranos, where they used to fall back on the dream sequence.
But because of The Sopranos, the dream sequence, it's so amped up, like what you're expecting. Like Sopranos dream sequences are great.
Yeah, well, they're very like Lynchian and 15, 20 minutes long.
Yeah, and they actually, and I don't think you should ever have a dream sequence unless it conveys something you don't already know. Like in Sopranos, he would dream about big pussy being guilty and stuff. Like, it always, every time he'd fall asleep, there'd be something that his subconscious was telling him. This one, she was like, she dreamt that she died.
And it just replayed the same things that had already been happening to her the episode.
Yeah,
that's true. Also, we noted that house is like a castle, and in the kitchen in her dream, which is supposedly taking place in that house, was really small.
Looks like it's like the tiniest little kitchen.
It must have been the servant's kitchen, or it was that whole thing where it's like, I was in my house, but it wasn't really my house.
Or it was her old house, because it looked a little bit like that.
Yeah, that's
what
I was thinking. It actually looked like where she and Don had lived.
Oh, well, maybe there was some. So now I have to rewatch that. Yeah.
I'm confused. I'm confused about the new house. I'm just confused.
It's very ostentatious.
It is like a castle, and I mean, props to whoever found that location, because that shot was beautiful this week of them on the lawn with the fireworks.
Beautifully shot.
Very stark, dramatic, but yeah, it's like they're living in Hearst
But
Castle.
Is it like 1960s real estate prices, or that? Like
well,
they could
I guess
how are
Henry's
they living?
very well. Have we ever gotten an idea of exactly how rich Henry is?
I think he does very well.
I know, but that house looks like is a palace.
It is, yes.
Like
I also think it's terrifying.
It's where like the mayor should be.
It's a
Like,
terrifying
he works
house.
for the mayor. But
like the house could be in like the American Horror Story
and then
show.
that shot, I mean, they lit it to be very imposing
and dark.
Draconian,
Yes,
dark.
yes. Yeah.
Everything's very dark. All the dark wood.
The dark,
furniture, yeah.
the dark
It
green
doesn't seem
carpet.
It doesn't seem like her taste at all.
I'm just saying that it doesn't compare to the apartment in Manhattan.
Well, right. But again, the
could?
difference between Megan's
Which
taste
is so
and,
fabulous.
So let's move on, because we took 20 minutes on Fat Betty, which I guess.
Which is a lot of people love Fat Betty though, so we
a lot
are
of people
a little.
don't like Fat
A
Betty.
lot.
though, too.
It was a very contentious episode online. A lot of people loved Fat Betty. A lot of people really hated Fat Betty.
Yeah.
But we'll move on to a brand new character. We actually had 2 characters introduced this week who probably are going to be bigger characters moving forward. First was Michael Ginsberg, who is the new copywriter, who's going to be on the Mohawk account. We'll talk about him in a moment. And the other was Dawn, Dawn's new secretary, Dawn.
I say Dawn and Dawn, but it's really Dawn and Dawn.
Dawn and Dawn.
Dawn and Dawn.
But, you know, the confusion between the two already fodder for jokes.
Dawn made, I have a problem with the Dawn storyline, because I worry that the show is out of its element when it comes to the race stuff. I really do. Like, I get nervous because I feel like it's never fully figured out how to address it, and it clearly wants to. And I found it so strange that like the beat of the way the episode ended last time was this big moment, and then Dawn suddenly working there, and I don't know exactly what I wanted. Like, I don't want like some like racial slurs happening. I don't want to hear the characters have to be more racist, but I worry that they're just gonna sneak Dawn in, and then I found it weird when she was in the meeting and just like hanging out with everybody, and you're just like, you guys are like racist and don't want her there, and we know it, and it's because of your time, but are we really just not going, we're gonna give a whole episode to Michael's introduction, and we're just, the big race thing that you constantly do not know how to handle, all the Mad Men people, we're once again gonna kind of like tuck away.
Yeah.
It was weird.
It was a little weird. I mean, they do tend to do stuff like that. They like having a big momentous thing happen, and then you get an episode where it's just it's ongoing, and then they'll deal with it next week.
I'm thinking like they're going to eventually deal with
I know, but this is like this is not just like an incident. Like, we often like, well, like Joan won't be in an episode or Peggy won't be in an episode, but this just seemed like a strange. I was a little skeptical of if the show knows how to handle it still. Like,
well, there was also a significant time jump. So like there was like a month.
Yeah, it was May. It was May last time,
oh, really?
because it was Memorial Day, and now it's July 4th.
Of July.
So they gave them like 2 months.
That makes me feel like they're glossing. That's exactly why I feel like they're glossing over. They're just like, we handled it. We didn't have to write that transition. She's there,
and they do. I
think they're going to eventually deal with it.
I think there has to be an episode on Dawn. There has to be an episode on Dawn.
There absolutely will be an episode where you get to know her better, and she's more established.
If the season ends and they haven't dealt,
I mean, I know they will, but there's something
you're nervous about it.
It's the only time when I watch it where I feel for the writers. I mean, I feel for them all the time, but I just think it's a hard topic, and it's time and time and time again, Mad Men has not quite known what to do about it.
Yeah, I think
because their world of their characters are not actually in the world of like the civil rights. I mean, I know when they have talked about it, but I just found it kind of. I found it kind of strange. It seemed too light.
Yeah, when the show started, they definitely had this ability they could make their show, and it really isn't connected to that. Yeah. And you would occasionally have a bit in the background, a character mentioning something going on.
Blackface Roger is like an amazing way of handling it, where like it's so. But it again is like through the lens of how he would deal with it. Right. And it's always Roger dealing with it, actually.
Yeah, like, and in this episode again, it's always darkest before the dawn.
I know, and like
he gets the
that
lines.
Was...
And there's a lot of...
And this is why they should have never gotten rid of Paul Kinsey.
We did. But yeah, casual racism was an undercurrent through the entire episode. But I mean, so they're obviously setting something.
After a while, they're going to have to stop being like casually racist and actually like develop the black characters. Like, I think, you know what I mean? Like, after a while, you're just going to be like, you can't keep addressing it that way, because we're actually going to start being offensive.
They're going to have to have an episode, like a suitcase-style episode that is like, here's the, what we're doing.
Would be hard. I mean, that's like that's a bar.
It is, but I'm saying they're gonna have like an episode where it's largely devoted to that as a storyline, as opposed to just.
What did you make of Harry stopping at her desk and being awkward? Like, what was that moment? Was he awkwardly hitting on her, or was he being racist towards her?
Well, I think he was trying to I think he was trying to be friendly.
Yeah.
And I think they were trying to be like, I mean, the whole thing was like, we're making a joke that we can't tell you guys apart. Clearly, we can tell you guys apart in every way. And
I think it was more like Harry's.
Oh, I didn't even get it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Harry's just being awkward with everybody this season, and they've kind of made him comic relief now, and that's how I read it, that this is just one example that we're seeing of how everybody in the office is now going to have to struggle with how to relate to this woman and how to deal with her when they're at work and how to be professional and
Yeah, he was being friendly.
So that's how I read it, is just he doesn't know what he's doing.
Because for a minute I was like, oh my God, he's not going to say something off. Like, he's already said so many
He's said and done several
things.
Awkward things.
Yeah. That was another, the storyline where they went to see the Stones. That was, I thought, kind of a hole in the episode where he signs the wrong band.
The trade wins.
The trade wins.
Yeah.
But doesn't he get backstage access because of that teenage girl who's a mega fan of the Stones? How would he not know?
I think you're right. Again, it was the implication that Harry gets stoned and he's such an idiot.
But why wouldn't the teenage girl tell him? Like, if she's like, it doesn't make any sense.
Unless he just was wandering around and got confused. Yeah, it's not. It was not clear the sequence of events definitely that happened when you leave Dawn and what happened back there. And also, we have a clip. I did not plan on showing it right now.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
We can talk about the Stones. But I have a clip of the trade wins, so we can get an idea of how hard it would be to mistake these guys for the Rolling Stones. Can we play the clip of the trade wins, and this is their song, New York's a Lonely Town? Do you have that queued up? So those guys are from Rhode Island. There's no chance that you would encounter those guys and be like, this is Mick and Keith. And, like, there's just, that would never happen. I don't care how stoned you are.
Did they look like that when they opened for the Stones? Or
I mean,
did they
that
have
was
longer
presumably
hair?
From the 60s. I don't
why
know
would,
what they looked
Harry,
like in 66.
I found it all kind of false, that whole storyline, because I also think, I know that they're trying to say that everyone's getting old, everyone's out of touch. I don't think they are as out of touch as they're trying to say. Like, I just didn't, like, they were a major thing, and they're not like 60 years old. And Harry
Harry like hobnobs with Hollywood types. Like, he even says that he, entertains,
and they're a major band. They're not just like the first radical wind into something.
Yeah, I mean,
it's already been established for years.
Mick Jagger is very distinctive looking.
Right.
So is Keith Richards.
What I thought was odd about it is Don actually says at a couple points, like, oh, we should have talked him out of this at the dinner table. And it's like, yeah, why didn't he? Like, I understand that this season he's being more...
Because of the beans.
This is new Don rolling over and taking everything.
Right.
He doesn't care.
They did set that up that Don is...
It's the Heinz.
He's going to be more agreeable, and they need to keep Klein, so Klein's ideas are suddenly a lot better. But this is one that, not only one is it very unlikely to happen, but two, it's just not... It's Beans and the Rolling Stones is a weird fit.
Or keep him weird. I felt like what's weird about this episode is, like, we established that what was so great about the premiere was that Don was just this new person, and it made sense when he checked out of the pitch meeting. You're just like, oh, Don doesn't care anymore. He's just phoning it in. He just wants to sleep with Megan all the time. Yeah. And this one, it was like the Don that we knew, exhibiting the traits that we were told in that last episode, but acting like the Don that we've always seen, and it didn't match up. He still seemed totally like regular Don in this one.
But when we get into Michael Ginsberg, I think that it was odd how, like, he was Don was like completely wooed by him and was like very taken by him. I didn't think that was out of character.
I was wooed by Michael Ginsberg.
I was wooed by him.
I actually feel like I thought that Don. I didn't think Don was a sucker. I feel like he was. I thought he felt not boring to Don, and Don's so bored.
And the work being very good up front is something that is going to impact Don's opinion of somebody as well. I mean, he's really all about, like, it doesn't matter what you say, it's the work that matters. And then this guy comes in with this portfolio.
But he seemed like alert. I feel like listening to Michael Ginsberg. Like I I feel like I'm gonna have a little bit of a problem if people are gonna try to tell me that Michael Ginsburg is an unlikable character. It's gonna be a problem because I found him like pretty much from the get-go. I mean, I'm not saying you are, but like I know what I know they were trying to be like.
Like he was overbearing.
I know how he was with Peggy, and I know that why she was weirded out, and I liked her speech to him. But like
But then they made him really likable.
Or he just like felt vibrant, like he like the whole thing.
He was charming too, I thought.
Yeah, and this whole show is like now that we've decided that the show is about like death and everyone aging and everyone feeling depressed with their lives. Suddenly this guy comes in. Him and Megan are really excited about their lives, right?
He's eager, and he's fresh. Like he has a fresh take. Or
and
I think Don responded to
generational
that.
shift is what this whole season clearly is at least partially about. And Ginsburg, in a couple ways, represents being that sort of transitional figure of the younger generation. I mean, I thought it was interesting that the last scene you see with him is he goes home to his like immigrant father, who he lives with, again, a mirror of Peggy from season 1, where she lived at home, probably in Brooklyn, where it seemed like both of those scenes were taking place. And then the dad's reaction upon hearing he gets this job is to do this like Hebrew prayer with him. And so again, and then you cut right from that scene, and I want to talk a little bit about how the editing was done, but you cut right from that scene to Betty and Sally and the ice cream sundae. So it definitely seemed like the whole episode is playing up this, you know,
do you think they're setting up Peggy?
Younger people
I mean, that's what the whole season is. The whole season is like mirrors and patterns.
Yeah.
But are they?
And then Don had that, again, I thought a little on the nose, backstage discussion with the girl, like, you just don't want us to have fun because you didn't have fun. We're worried about you.
Yeah,
you know?
I feel like that was so out of character.
It was a little on.
And also, he likes young girls now. He's married to a young girl. Like I just don't. I found that whole Rolling Stone thing so much less effective than him getting stoned with the Bohemians. Like when he did that in that second season or something,
and he walked out of the room.
It was so good because he seemed scared. Like when he seemed so scared by the weirdness of this really raw life.
And California Dawn.
And
like that.
Yeah, and this one is like Rolling Stones are a commercial packaged entity that he would not be that he wouldn't have to be that out of touch with. It's not like just. I know that they're like a radical thing, but at this point, Don's he's done crazier things and gone to a Rolling Stone concert.
Yeah.
And I feel like they were really trying to be like, he's an old man now.
They're playing up, last week and then this week too, they're definitely playing up him being very out of place. And he's a character we're not used to before this season, maybe the last season a little bit, but we're not used to seeing him very out of place. He's usually in his element.
But yeah, Megan says, you're so square, you have edges.
Right.
And he says, I need to look like the man.
Yeah.
But I think they're forcing it. I feel like they're writing these lines, but I'm not buying with what's coming across.
As previous episodes. Yeah. This was not a subtle episode, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Do you think they're setting up Peggy and Ginsburg?
Yes. I mean, I think even whether or not it happens or if there's just tension there.
Yeah, there was chemistry.
One of them is going to want to be with the other at least or something. Yeah. I mean, well, because they're setting up. One, normally Peggy is the #1 most competitive person in the office. And this one they're setting up, everyone else is warning her. You get Stan warning her, this guy's going to come in and take your job, don't hire anyone too good. Then you have Roger basically echoing that same thing. So, and she's the one usually who would be the most paranoid about somebody else coming in and showing her up.
But she said that she's motivated by the creative people, and maybe they're going to have a relationship that's stimulating to one another.
And she's never had an equal the whole time.
No, she's never had.
Except for Dawn. She always is like, she's always having to work harder and prove her worth, but she's always been the most talented.
And she says at one point, like, well, I do better when I'm surrounded by people that, are also really good. And we do realize that's true. When she and Don collaborate, it tends to raise everybody's game a little bit. And she really hasn't had a collaborator like Danny last season, Stan. These are not people who are on her level. Danny, and that's another thing I wanted to ask. And I am a Jew, so I feel like I'm allowed to say this. But did Mike come off a little Jewy, a little like they're playing up this New York Jew sort of persona? And Danny also established as a Jewish copywriter last season, and he was short, but otherwise he didn't really play very much into
I was wondering that too, because at first, when you first hear him, you're just like, oh my God.
It's the accent, it's the Woody Allen style quips.
I think it's real. Definitely the accent is a real thing.
It didn't strike false to me. I actually thought he was.
I was impressed by
bowel focused. Like even that part.
Bowel focus was weird.
Yeah.
But I was impressed by the way he looked, because I felt like there's a lot of direction they could have gone if they really wanted to like shout Jewish.
Yes, right.
And like so his the way he looks, like he looks ethnically Jewish, like his dark eyebrows and like his kind of curly hair, like he actually did seem like really like second generation Jewish, and that I liked the choice of how I felt like they used some restraint on.
Yeah. But I mean, giving him lines like, oh, that's what they said about Mein Kampf. Kid really has a voice. I mean, you can hear Woody Allen saying that line. And it's a great line. It's funny. But, you know,
but somebody said, like, isn't Woody Allen, he's on the scene by then, right?
Yes, this is, I mean, and I think they might be playing to that, too, that this is a transitional period for Jews in American culture, where now you've got Lenny Bruce and Woody Allen, and these voices who are, you know, more contemporary and very urban. And, so
I mean, I feel like if they're going to have, like, the advertising guys who aren't Jewish talk in little sound bites, like, that's the equivalent of having the Jewish guy talk in his sound bite.
Yeah,
like, do that kind of, I mean, I was on the fence about it, but, ultimately, he won me over. He was weird. I want him to stay weird, though. I'm worried that they're going to make him just talented, and I want him to be like, I miss weird Peggy. I miss like the weirdness of the first season when she was crazy, and Pete and all that. I do feel like I'm a little fatigued by the idea of like a whole season of just like talking about time, and just having to feel sad all the time. And I miss like the weirder, I miss Pete losing hit. I'm really bummed that Pete looks like he's just competing with Roger now, because I've always found Pete such a weird loose cannon who can do anything, and he's so scary and terrifying and interesting to me, and like that's kind of been rubbed away, and Peggy seems a little stabilized right now, and I'm looking forward to her feeling a little crazy. And this guy, I hope that they, instead of just going in like a Jewish, like charming direction, I want him to be.
I think there's definitely interesting ground to explore here. The one last thing I had in my notes about Mike that I wanted to bring up is, it did seem like when you saw him at home with his dad, a lot of this stuff that I'm complaining about was dialed back. So then you get to the question of, is that really who he is, or is this what he puts on? Because, you know, just like Roger has expectations of like, oh, you know, it's good for an agency to have a Jew now. Like, he's going to be that Jew, and he's going to be the entertaining guy with the persona.
Well, also, have you seen, like, you know, Woody Allen? Have you ever seen Woody Allen, like, documentaries about Woody Allen's home life? It seems just like that.
Right.
Like, that's always what I was startling to me about Woody Allen, is he comes from, like, that apartment. And I feel like there's a whole, like, American Jews like reinvented themselves in a very conscious way. Like Woody Allen like was completely, his whole early career is about like building this life that he did not come from.
Right.
And so I feel like I see a lot of Michael Ginsberg doing that.
Sure.
And he talks about it. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they're not I think where I expected the third, or I guess second season of the second episode of the season to go, to bring this new character in who is, you know, not a, you know, it's not directly confronting the race issue. It's not another woman that Don wants to maybe get involved in. It's this, you know, other character is going to be there to sort of complement Peggy. And
that is what I find worried about the race part. Is I'm like, Matthew Weiner knows about being Jewish.
Yes.
And so like we're going to give a whole episode to that, and not to like hammer it. And I'm sure I do think Don's going to have an episode, but that was part of what made me feel so weird. Where I was just like, we've been waiting 5 seasons for someone to actually like develop a non-white character, and then. So it's a little. We'll see. I have some patience.
I do want to go back. We've covered the Stones already. There were a few extra things I wanted to go over there. One, I thought, and we'll play. I have a little clip of it, but I thought it was interesting that the Heinz CEO had seized on "Time Is on My Side," which obviously it was like, you know, relevant in 1966, but also again
that was like the most screenwriting trope.
Very on the nose about the theme of the whole episode, and how, you know, time bearing down all these characters. And really, Michael and Megan are the only ones in the main cast who really actually do have time on their side. But let's take a look at a little clip of the song for people who don't know. "Time Is on My Side," Rolling Stones. Do we have that one?
Yeah, he looks just like the trademark.
So there's "Time Is on My Side."
Was that the Trade Winds or was that the Stones?
It's so easy to get them mixed up. I know.
I kind of spaced out, so I don't remember who that was.
It was
the Stones. Okay.
Anybody else with comments about the Stones? Because there was one final bit of trivia I thought was interesting. Anything else about the Stones? No.
I want to hear your trivia.
The Who Sell Out was an album that came out in 1967, 1 year after this episode is set, and that had the whole album in a lot of ways is a parody of rock bands using their songs for commercials and parody sort of advertising. And on the cover is Roger Daltrey with a can of Heinz baked beans. Do you think that was an intentional joke that they were sort of goofing on that?
Yeah.
Like that's why they picked this particular product?
I think they would be aware of that in all of their research of that era.
And one
because you found it like with one Google search, right? Like how long?
I actually know I had that was one I didn't have to Google search because I have the Who Sell Out album, and the whole album, even all the songs open and start with like fake jingles and ads using the songs, and so it was definitely a thing. And they do reference in the episode that the Rolling Stones did in the UK do a cereal commercial, I think is what Don said.
Yeah.
It was for Rice Krispies, and I did manage to find this clip today.
Oh,
so
good.
let's take a look at that if we can. It's the actual Rolling Stones Rice Krispies ad that the Heinz CEO was hoping to play on.
Wake up in the morning, there's a snap around the place. Wake up in the morning, there's a crackle in your face. Wake up in the morning, there's a pop that really says, Rice Krispies to you, and you, and you. Pour on the milk and listen to the sound that says it's nice. Pour on the milk and listen to the crackle of that rice. Get up in the morning to the pop that says it's rice. Hear them talking crisp.
Then it was like.
So we were talking during the clip here in the studio. Today, it's very common for songs to get repurposed in commercials, but it was probably also fairly common back then. I mean, I doubt Don would have even given it a shot if it was never happening.
But now we're like today, it's a sellout thing, right? Was it?
Yeah, I feel like back then because there was all those like. They would do like the talk shows, and it would be like Milton Berle or something, and it would be integrated into the. Show. I mean, advertising was considered much more of an art form, I feel like back then, as clearly must be the case because we're watching the show about it. And so I feel like it doesn't seem like now we know what is happening if we see a band on a commercial. We know
the audience wasn't as jaded on things like product
everything was new
placement, right? It was all still. You just liked seeing your favorite celebrities or hearing a Stone song, and it wasn't quite so jarring. Today, if like the cool new indie band immediately sold a bunch of their songs,
they probably made more money back then too.
Probably.
Like based on union rules these days, or however it's like licensing fees or whatever, you know.
Yeah, one thing. Clever user in the chat room, lovely name, has raised this, and I wanted to ask it too. As I mentioned at the very top of the show, this was the directorial debut of Jon Hamm. This was the first episode that Don Draper himself, has directed. Obviously had something to do with the episode being not very Don focused. He was not in as much, so he could focus more on the direction.
Is that what happens though? Can you direct yourself?
Usually, I think when you see the episodes where a person from the show directs, it's an episode that's not focused on their character. Maybe just they don't have to spend as much time preparing their lines.
Slattery was the only other one that ever directed an episode.
Well, that's just Mad Men. But I mean, even Breaking Bad, like when Cranston.
I was saying because he's not really a main character, so it doesn't. I mean,
they
don't really focus on.
Even Roger will come in for a few scenes in a lot of episodes. So, but I thought there was some interesting stuff about the direction on this episode. The main one being a lot of the sequences kind of had these quick jumps between, like these very radical kind of shifts between scenes. The two that really stuck out to me, Betty getting out of the tub and we see her from behind.
The body double.
Obviously some sort of body double.
It was very shining.
And that jumps immediately to her at the doctor's office getting her prognosis. And then again, we had, and I mentioned it before, Mike and his father praying, and then immediately in this weird jump cut where you could still hear them praying, but then you see
it was almost
Sally
like I feel like it
Betty.
faded out and then in.
Right, and
it wasn't like a.
And I mean, what did you think of that? Did you notice that? And what did you think overall? How did Hamm do?
He did very.
I thought he did a good job. I mean, I wasn't as focused on those until now that you're mentioning them. But, I mean, it could have been having something to do with just sort of showing how separate those worlds are, maybe, or the contrast between the worlds.
Well, it was a scene of a father and son and then a mother and daughter.
Well, that's true.
And, and
so there's parallels, too.
Yeah, and there was food is sort of an element that Mike was coming home to, like, make dinner, presumably.
And also, what's his name? Harry eating the chips in the car.
Well, Harry eating, stuffing his face as well with White Castle.
But also there's the juxtaposition of their household in the city being very stark, and he really needed this job to feed his family, and she lives in this like bloated house,
opulent, and they're eating
there's
sundaes,
like shoving like and they did mention Romney in the.
Oh, yes, I love that.
So there's a little bit of like, people dealing with austerity versus just sort of decadence, which is relevant to today's time.
That's true. I didn't really even think to. I thought there was just like a kind of a little winking joke that Henry's on the phone. And he's like, "Screw Romney, we're not going there talking."
But
about,
it's funny
George
that
Romney.
he would say that because she makes the point that he's a Republican.
I mean, yeah, he's definitely a Republican.
Henry
Dawn's a
is.
Republican too. I mean,
well, they're all.
they're all
most
Republican,
of the main cast is Republican.
Harry is definitely. I mean, he could have been a Republican making fun of another. Just not thinking he was good enough. I mean, making fun of a fellow Republican.
Yeah, that's what.
But I felt like it very much felt like a liberal wrote that joke and put it into a Republican character's mouth. Like it didn't.
Yeah, I mean, who knows why
ring.
George Lindsay would not have wanted to have a meeting with John Lindsay?
Like we're just going to
George
assume
Romney,
that the writers are liberal.
Yes.
The writers.
And so I do feel like it was because they call him a fool. Like I feel like it was a little bit too like us inserting our agenda into a Republican's
Well, I
mouth.
thought
Like it
that
could have been
too.
enough to just be like to say mention Romney's dad.
Calls him a clown because Romney's a clown.
I thought that too, but now that we're talking about the opulence versus austerity lifestyle, now I'm wondering if there wasn't more.
I mean, I feel like they could have just mentioned Romney's.
But I thought that.
I like mentioning Romney's dad because I think it is also not only is it about the opulent stuff, but it's about like legacy and fathers and sons
being stuck in politics for generations and stuff like
And we're not, and actually how
we've never moved past that.
And when we watch the show, it's not that we're moving closer and closer to our time. So like, it's like we are going to be experiencing these things too. And so like it was like this hand linking us. I don't mind the mention of Romney's dad. I felt calling him a fool felt like
his character might not say that.
Yeah, and it was
because he's
like,
a Republican.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think all Republicans think all other Republicans are not clowns.
But the line
he might have thought George Romney was a clown for whatever reason, and at this point in Michigan politics, perhaps Romney was.
Maybe he was doing.
But at this point, like the one thing to hear him say is to call him a clown. So
it is true. It definitely felt at least like a little bit of a wink and a nod to contemporary viewers
and to the demographic of the show,
and who hear the name Romney and may not even realize. That
there
his
was
dad
a Romney,
was political at the time, and like just aren't going to even connect it to that. So yeah, I definitely thought that was an interesting thing to throw in there. But and again, any other thoughts about Ham?
I mean, I feel like the way it was shot, that house was shot, seemed really different from the other way the rest of the show. Like how they showed her house. I mean, I haven't really seen her house much, but it seemed like a directorial choice. Everything about her world felt like a different show in an interesting way, and that seems like a director.
That had to have been directorial too. Like when the phone rang and the camera pulls back and you see them in this sort of huge hallway. Like everything seems very far away in the house, except for the dream and the weird kitchen and the tiny kitchen. But everything else in that
stairs and everything.
Yes,
that staircase is so domineering.
Yes, it's very domineering, and I think that sort of loneliness feeling was definitely a
It's a bit like they moved to Downton Abbey all of a sudden.
It's just or Sunset Boulevard.
It's very,
oh my God, that would be my favorite show ever.
If Mad Men characters just moved into
Downton Abbey and Mad Men became one.
It's only about 50 years apart. We could probably figure out some sort of crossover. So we talk a little bit about Don and Megan, and then there's a couple other characters who didn't have starring roles, but I wanted to talk about as well. So I think this was the first time, from Don's perspective maybe, that we've seen divorce as a remaining social stigma. It sort of seems like Betty and Don got divorced. Everybody who knows them sort of knows about it. I had forgotten even about the first season when Betty was so judgmental towards Helen Bishop, the divorced neighbor. But then they're having dinner with the Heinz CEO or whoever's representing Heinz and his wife. And it's, well, Don was divorced and then we met at the office. Well, that's none of my business. She cuts it off right there. So yeah, interesting to bring that back now, whereas I feel like we had sort of almost forgotten about divorce being that big an issue.
Because we saw all these people divorced. Roger and...
Yeah, we've seen Roger and Don and
Yeah, and Henry was, his wife died or something, right? His previous wife?
Henry.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think he left
and
anybody.
Duck got divorced too.
Yes.
Heavily, and what's his name? Almost got divorced, but didn't.
Lane,
yes.
But he stuck it out. They had such a great marriage.
I feel like there is this missing role of the women characters right now, though, where because that Heinz woman, the Heinz wife, and then Henry's wife, they're a type, right? And then we've got all the pretty. We've got a lot of. Peggy and Joan and Betty are such particular, they each represent something about progress and stuff. Right. But I kind of miss having like the representation, like the woman that he dated last season that he dumped.
Bethany Van Nuys or Dr. Faye?
Dr. Faye. Like I kind of miss having like a.
Or the teacher from the previous season.
The teacher, I forgot.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't like the teacher maybe.
No,
really
she was
either.
crazy. I
But she was a very
so
a quirky, idiosyncratic
Yeah, because now
character.
I do think it's kind of getting divided a little bit.
Well, let me throw one more name at you, because there is another character that has started popping up, which is Henry's mother, Pauline. We had seen her maybe once or twice before, and then
I remember seeing her.
She
was not nice in the
She had 2 scenes here, and then she's in the scenes from next week as well. So we're going to be seeing even more of Pauline.
And we're going to see Joan's mom too next week.
Yeah,
and Betty does say he has an overbearing mother, he has a domineering mother or something.
Right.
But then she gives her that whole speech about the diet pills, and she says, well, then why don't you take them? And she said, I would if I could. Believe me, I would if I could.
She's got a weak heart, she says.
Weak heart.
Yeah.
So what is that?
Again, I do think it is setting up the I'm dancing as fast as I can plotline.
Yeah. Do diet pills really help you lose weight? Is it real? Like
I think the same way that doing speed would.
I mean, it's speed. So like, is it really going to be like if next week when Betty or whenever she comes back and she's still skinny again, is it going to feel convincing?
I don't think
really
if they did it, unless
works?
they set up like 6 months has passed between these 2 episodes again.
Yeah,
or
but
something.
it is how like that's like you can just become a speed freak and then.
Yeah, I mean you would have drastic side effects. But
think
yeah, it's massively appetite suppressing.
I mean, she's not going to be able to sleep if she's taking this stuff.
She's going to be wandering around the house.
She's going to be. I mean, January Jones has been stretched on the show before, but this would be a real. That's not an easy thing to pull off and not make it
I can see her playing
too big.
I can play her being like pill popper.
Have you ever seen I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can?
I have.
I unfortunately have as well. It's the weirdest movie I've ever seen, and they are like freaked out on these.
Yeah, somebody in the chat room as well brought up the classic Saved by the Bell, where Elizabeth Berkley becomes a speed freak.
Oh, I didn't watch that show. So.
All about the perils of overdoing that performance.
And Family Ties.
Yes,
but he didn't overdo it. He was wonderful in that episode.
Yeah.
I
don't remember that one.
Cited that. That's like the opening credits. You know when he swivels on his chair across.
Oh, that's when he's speed freaking?
He takes Mallory's. He takes Mallory's diet pills.
Right.
And then he starts doing his homework all the time, and he can't stop. And
oh my God! If only Mad Men would bring back diet pills, I'd try some. I'd try some. Why not?
Adderall.
Get some more stuff done.
As long as you're generally in control.
Yeah.
You think you can handle it.
I really feel like it's the direction that it is going. That she is dancing towards. I do.
I
just don't think. I do not see the.
Well, she definitely wants the quick fix. I mean, she's not someone that is going to examine her inner psychology.
Right. Well, that's kind of what was interesting to me. Was sort of what I was saying at the beginning of the episode, where the doctor's office scene just has you so primed to expect classic Betty behavior, which is, oh, I'm fat, I'm going to really re-examine my life or what's really wrong or try to get to the root of this problem, or just eat better and exercise more, but I'm going to go for this like quick fix, just fix me, just give me the pill. And
I felt like though when I first saw her talking about like gaining weight, I felt like it was a mix of like she is older, she could just have put on weight, and I was kind of on her side about like wanting the diet pills, feeling confused, like this has never happened to my body until the very end when she eats a sundae and you realize that she's actually really has just been picking out the whole time.
Well, they had that very telling shot of her with the bag of Bugles, because I don't honestly know, when was the last time you saw Betty just snack? Like, it's never something
She smokes.
but it's never...
And drinks wine.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I bet Henry doesn't like it.
Or at least in the house,
something?
maybe not around the kids. And that goes back to what we were talking about last week, which is the drinking and smoking generally in this episode is just way...
Because she wouldn't have gained so much weight if she were still
smoking
smoking as much.
Yeah, now they're smoking doobs, but they're not nearly as much.
They're smoking doobs and eating 20 White
drunk because
Roger's still drinking, and he even comes back from the Mohawk Airlines meeting like, oh, those Mohawk boys.
He'll
and he got
never
them
stop
drunk
drinking, I don't think.
Yeah, I think the implication is he's now
he'll continually go down
and
that.
Realizing now that he's too old to change.
And they don't show Bert Cooper. They showed him in the first season premiere,
second.
and he said,
He's
"Tell
not
me
part
when
of
the
the company anymore."
He's sort of
a name though, isn't he?
Right, in name only, but he quit last season. Remember, he took his shoes and he left.
Oh
yeah, and like so he's in name and he doesn't have an office.
He doesn't have an office, and
Yeah. So to transition, because that was the last thing I really wanted to dig into was Pete and Roger.
Oh wait, I have one more thing though about Megan.
Shoot.
I'm totally confused about this whole. Why are they trying to tell us that didn't happen where Megan wiped up the milkshake when Sally, like last season, when Dawn proposes to her, Sally spills her milkshake. Megan very patiently wipes it up. Dawn obviously feels like this maternal connection with her and sees her as this mother figure he didn't have and that Betty never was. And that is what makes him suddenly fall for his secretary which he has never done before. And suddenly, I feel like they have completely rewritten her character. And especially, normally, I felt that last episode too, where she was suddenly the sex pot, and I was like, I kind of like this though, that Dawn's just under her sexual sway. But if we're actually gonna have an episode where it's all about her not even liking kids or being a good mother, I feel like we're really revising what happened, and it doesn't seem Mad Men-like to forget a detail like that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's weird.
Well, the milkshake was such a central image of their courtship.
It proposed to her. Like, obviously, like, it totally was like, oh my God, mother figure. I need a mother figure.
And she taught them the French song, and she was
his nanny.
And she was just so good with the kids.
And now he's just like, well, she wouldn't be. I couldn't even let her near my children. Like, it's just
well, but I think you could read that as being his reaction anyway. Is more like he's got this lingering connection with Betty that he can't find, and he tried to find it with Bethany Van Nuys, was basically a younger version of Betty, and it didn't work, and now he's trying to find it with Megan, and it's still not there, and that's how I read that interaction, that he's saying, you know, like, I mean, Megan she'll try her best, but
it's a different character. I mean, it's fine. I like the direction our character is going, but she is not what we saw when it happened. And I know people change and all that, but I find they don't quite
I thought the oddest quote from Megan this episode was, Don tells her, you know, Betty's going to be fine, and she doesn't have it, and Megan says she just needs to have something to call you about, which is really very cold and a really bitchy thing to say.
And also, Megan is very secure in her relationship with Dawn.
Right. That was a much more jealous and aggressive side openly. I mean, Megan, we've sort of hinted that she is an aggressive person, but she does a good job of covering it between.
Showing a different side.
Yeah, behind the girly. Yes.
I love the line, which I thought was so subtle, when Roger says, well, she's a fighter, and Dawn says, please. Like, it was so good, because they both were just like, it's Betty. Which Betty we're talking about here?
Yeah.
And it wasn't, and that was like, unlike a lot of the lines in this episode, it actually didn't hit you over the head, and it was genuinely funny, and I watched it twice. It made me laugh both times.
Yeah, Chubby Werewolf in the chat room is making a case against this. He thinks Megan is just defying our expectations of what she was going to become. That we thought she was going to become this like very pliant.
I know that's
Betty
fine,
2.0.
but like I know, but they still live in the world that this happened in. Like Dawn was still there. I wasn't there. They can change the character. They can defy the expectations, but like Dawn. We did know that she once was the kid's like nanny, and now they're like pointedly being like, well, I just feel like the lines didn't quite match up.
I think
it's fine. She can defy. I like what's happening with her.
I think that's fair. Back to Pete and Roger, just very quickly, because we're obviously, this is leading somewhere, that they're sort of at war. And I actually read there's one moment. It's the scene where Don tells him, like, oh, Betty has cancer, well, of course, prematurely, because she doesn't. And he kind of uses that to segue away from this monologue that Roger has, where it sort of sounds like we may be setting up him leaving. That he's like, he kind of doesn't really, he's not really into it anymore. He doesn't know what he's still doing there. Do you think that's where the season is going to go? That is Pete actually going to manage to successfully get Roger out?
That'd be so awful. That'd be like the worst thing that could happen.
I don't see that coming. I do think it's leading up to some kind of
big blow,
meltdown or crisis of sorts that's going to manifest in a very uncomfortable way. But I don't see him leaving. I feel like he's not effective anymore in his job, but he does have this fighting spirit in him to hang on to it.
And we have, there were small ways that we did see there may be potential for a change in him. He has a nice little scene with Peggy where he actually congratulates her on hiring this new guy, and when was the last time Peggy and Roger had a genuine
when she asked
one-on-one
for an
interaction?
Office. The one time she asked for an office.
Is that what, season 1? Season 2?
That was a long time ago.
Right.
She said, I need an office, and he's like, well, then ask for it. Like, that's what you do. Like, he kind of mentored her very briefly. He was on his way out the door when he did that, but
right.
there was something
about that. Because of Pete, he says, I loved that kid. I brought that kid in, and that's what he's so hurt by, that he feels like he mentored Pete, and now Pete's angling for his job. And he never felt that with Peggy.
But it's so cool with Peggy, because like I feel like they've done such a good job of like, she is like such a symbol of so many things, but she really is so fully integrated in the show. And like they really, like every time, even when they bring up like, you're the ambitious woman, you are this, you that, it never feels like, oh, they're just reminding us who she is. Like she is such a part of the team, and like they're like slow, begrudging giving over of respect to her. Like I love watching every time, and they just do like her. So it is nice to see her actually fitting in. I find if they get rid of Roger, it's going to be such a problem. He is the
I don't think
joy.
they'd ever be able to get rid of him from
but
the show.
he's the joy of the show. Like, obviously, you're just waiting for him.
He has the funniest lines.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought was interesting is season 1 as well, they had discussed bringing on a Jewish employee, and he had immediately poo-pooed it. Like, oh, that'd be it's like a joke to him. And now he's not only into it, but he thinks it makes him more modern. And so we have tracked.
Was
it took him
that
6
when
years.
I was Jewish, though, right?
Danny was Jewish.
Yeah.
And he was
hired
Roger's hire because of Jane's cousin. Or
right.
Something. But was Kinsey a Jewish character?
No.
No.
Oh, I thought.
There's no Jewish.
There were no Jews at the beginning, and it
They
was
had to find
an
one in
issue.
the mailroom.
Right, it was an issue because they had
Oh, they had to
the
find the one in the
department
mailroom.
store,
Yeah.
the Mencken,
Rachel
Menckens?
Mencken,
Rachel
yeah.
Mencken,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
had to find a Jew. The only one they had, was from the mailroom.
Okay.
And but Roger treated it as a joke. I mean, it's ridiculous that they would have a Jewish staff member on their
Yeah.
floor.
Yes.
and
I mean,
now
he's still treating it as a joke, but
he is, but now it's a joke in the way that now it's real, and I'm going to goof around about it. As
yeah,
opposed
and that
to
guy's
what
gonna
a-
like take over the company. I mean, there
Right.
could be something interesting. Well, I guess it's that guy's a copywriter, so it's not directly competitive with Pete. I'm looking forward to Pete blowing a circuit board in some way. Like he is a crazy person, and he
right.
just is. Like I don't care how much on top of his game he seems right now. He is crazy. And like he always delivers. He always
And all 3 episodes we've seen the,
He does,
the
every
pressures,
season.
the pressure's tightening around
so
him.
upset by everything. Like he
Yeah.
can't ever have a good time.
Everything bottling
he's so
up, yeah.
competitive.
And
he's
he
so
had
jealous.
such a sad,
love
rich
him.
person's life.
Yeah.
You know, like that sort of loveless family that owned all of Manhattan. Like he comes from that huge, and they don't have a dime left. Like there's something so.
And he's a
and he doesn't
non-creative
care.
guy around creative people, but he actually
And he's a
isn't creative.
frustrated
Well, and
creative
he's
person.
also, we're seeing the last of a breed. He's a young guy that was really eager to jump in with this establishment crowd and be
Yeah.
one of those guys. And there was that amazing shot last year of Peggy taking off with her new hippie
I loved
friends,
that. I
and
loved that
Pete
shot.
going over and talking to Sterling and all those other guys. And there's the glass partition sort of in between them.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's sort of representing what none of the younger kids that we're seeing now at like the Stones concert or Megan's friends, none of them
don't
have
want any of it.
interest
But there's
in being
still a
part of
Pete.
Don's
There's a
world.
Pete in every generation. I don't know if that's the last of a Pete. Like
I mean, in the
like
show,
like
yeah.
a prep school, but like a prep school kid who's part of the establishment. I
Right,
feel like
who
is
grew
actually the
up
direction.
around privilege.
Yeah,
and-
that is. I mean, we have Mitt Romney and stuff like that. I
It
mean,
is, yeah.
he's closer to like Henry Francis than anyone.
Right. It is a cultural type, but Pete's the sort of only young person on the show that is really firmly
Yeah.
in that world of he expects to be Roger one day.
Yeah.
And preferably sooner rather
Yeah.
than
He doesn't want to be Roger. Like he's disdainful of Roger.
Right. But he wants that
Yeah.
position. He wants
Yeah.
to be the
He wants
guy
to
in
run.
the suit
He wants
running
to be
the
the head
company.
account
Yeah.
man.
And he doesn't, what Abe is talking about or what, Mike is doing or what all these other characters are about is sort of not what he's about at all. So two quick things, more trivia that I wanted to bring up. One, the girls at the Rolling Stones concert don't know who Charlton Heston is, which I thought was really strange because wouldn't he have been a big marquee star in '66? He was just in Greatest Story Ever Told, Agony and the Ecstasy, Major Dundee. Wouldn't it be like young girls not knowing who Russell Crowe is now or something?
I don't know.
Did anyone else think that was, or
didn't.
maybe in the chat room somebody can explain that to me?
That one didn't strike me because I didn't know enough about Charlton Heston's career to know.
Because this was like,
But they were
he was
how,
not like
15?
the old guy at this
No,
point.
he was a-
in
he
the
was
mid
an action
'60s. He was a
But they're
Yeah.
how old
They
was
were
he?
15.
Yeah, because they're making Don seem like the old guy. So
Right. I mean, Ben-Hur would have been, I think, 61, 62,
Oh,
so
so
not
that
that
is
much
really
earlier.
big, yeah.
He was like at the height of his fame and power, and El Cid. Ben-Hur was 59, El Cid was 61.
But
so
it
he's
could also
like-
be that they're just like Ben-Hur is what they're rebelling against too. Like everything, if they're the Rolling Stones.
Right, well, it's
they're
late
just-
50s.
Yeah.
So, and
And
he
it's
was a
just-
50s star, but I'm saying, even a 90s star teenagers
Yeah, it's
would
true,
know
they would
about
know.
today.
It would just be in the zeitgeist, and you wouldn't. Be
Right,
able
I mean,
to
George
avoid it.
Clooney may not be the hippest, he's not Ryan Gosling, but young girls would know who he is. Anyway, I thought
Yeah, that is kinda weird.
That was an odd moment that they picked Heston over actors who would have been much easier to
not know who they were.
Yeah, I mean, you could have picked Richard Widmark in a second, and the young girls then wouldn't have known who that is.
I found it all forced. That's why I found that whole little conversation forced.
That moment, and then Tony Tracy in the chat room saying, well, they were more into music than movies. Well, fair enough, but again, I think even kids today who are all about music would still know who, like Russell Crowe or Ben Affleck.
And like nobody's all about just one thing. Like we live in a world
and
where
they watch Bewitched.
Exactly.
They watched Bewitched. They were able to make.
Now I thought that was a funny moment
when they compare him to, and they go to Darren immediately.
Yeah.
And not only do they call him Darren, but again, only if you watch Bewitched, as I used to, they call him Durwood, which was Dora's sort of put down name for him. Like his mother-in-law sardonically referred to him as Durwood, because it's not his real name. His real name is Darren. So again,
So overall, there were a lot of great moments in the episode, but I'm not giving it my A+ mark in comparison. I mean,
I think
it's my favorite show. I'm saying that to the world.
And
I love Mad Men.
It was
do no wrong.
It was a little on the nose, but I enjoyed the scene of Harry and Don at White Castle, where Harry's eating 20 burgers. He doesn't want to go home.
Oh, I find it. I mean, it's fine. I find it like we're getting into sitcom territory with Harry at this point. I really do. We're just like, especially when he comes back, and we've already kind of established that too. Like, I think they are a little confused about what they're doing with Don right now, and like, I like it, either I want Don to be terrifying again, or I want him to be like checked out, but like, Harry trying to, it's just, something is not tracking with me, but I also ultimately feel there's something, I like this show, this show is wonderful, but I find there's something must be flawed with this episode if we're still working around Fat Betty. Like, I feel like everything we're saying is these moments, and Fat Betty is obviously the focal point of this episode.
Yeah, this was definitely
and we are
the Fat Betty
having
episode.
and we
it should have been titled Fat Betty.
Fat Betty,
And we're not like, I feel like we should be here like, oh my God, Fat Betty is the best thing I've ever seen, and it should be unanimous, and we should be blown away. And I just don't think that is the general feeling. We are just kind of picking these little moments that are just like.
I think part of it was technical, like you were saying, though. That it was just very obvious that she had this prosthetic.
Well, what about this too?
Subtle.
What if you had one episode with just Fat Betty thinking she's fat, and then in the next episode she had the cancer scare? So you could still get the cancer scare story.
I would have preferred that.
But you would have had more time to adjust to Betty just being unattractive and feeling unattractive.
I would have preferred that, because
I think that would have been interesting.
totally into Betty feeling invisible, like receding from everything she's ever known. It would have had to be a little
the waddle
less,
was a bit much,
the quilted jacket and all that. It was just,
and the
hair, into
the hair being teased up, like to kind of like elongate.
It was so Fat
this.
Monica and Friends, where you're just like.
It was a little, But Chubby Werewolf in the chat room advises, and I'm going to recommend everyone do this in their head, to sing Fat Betty to yourself to the tune of Black Betty. It's actually quite amusing.
I mean, and also, like, when I was writing my recap, I was like, do I call her Fat Betty? And, like, everyone, like, every single review is Fat Betty.
Fat Betty.
It is firmly.
And I read, I think it was maybe Slate, I forget what blog it was, where they actually titled it The Wait. That's what they called this episode.
Oh, God.
Last thing I want to mention is, and I always make a thing out of the closing song, because I feel like they always pick it for some sort of, there's always some hidden meaning there. And this week, again, it was a little on the nose.
Oh,
it was
found it,
16 going on
Way
17.
Sound of Music.
From The Sound of Music.
But not just that song, like, the line that it came in on was, like, spelling out what Betty is going through. Like, the line that they actually said was, like, practically said, Betty sits in her kitchen feeling adrift.
Yeah, it was, and I mean, if you really get down to it, it's a young man telling a young woman, like, well, he's already 18, so she should just do everything he says because he's smarter and older and more experienced. And it's like, that really is exactly what the episode was sort of about. Totally unprepared am I to face a world of men. Timid and shy and scared am I of things beyond my ken. I need someone older and wiser telling me what to do. You are 17 going on 18. I'll depend on you. Those are the
it was
lyrics.
so. It was a weird slip.
That's very on the nose for me.
Yeah.
They usually would not be as blatant with the closing song.
Yes.
Thoughts? Yes? Everybody agrees?
I was so startled by that. I was just like, absolutely not.
It seemed like an interesting choice.
I thought that the whole episode was like that, though.
It was,
everything was like
in a way.
spoon-fed to us.
I know, but
It wasn't.
I know.
Why did they do that?
Because it could have been.
Is it because they're trying to get new viewer, like the new, like?
I really think they were I really think the Fat Betty thing, it was confusing to them too. I think they were trying to do this thing, and they didn't know what to do with it, and so like, and it is really 2 episodes that are happening because everything else around we can't deny the weirdness of the Fat Betty plot line, and then we're trying to be normal everywhere else, and I just think that's going to be a problem, and then I don't know.
I mean, because they could have easily shot around her pregnancy. I mean, they do that all the time on TV. Like,
and she probably wouldn't have been showing that much at this point.
But I think he saw it as a challenge. I think the idea of being like let's use we're going to show her aging is interesting. It just, like I said, I want him, if he's going to do that, make it so she's never thin again.
And thematically, it really does link up with the rest of the season, of her now suddenly feeling old and unattractive and unappealing. The kids are creeping up behind, and she's feeling her age.
And I wrote in my review that one problem I have with this whole aging thing with Mad Men is that I don't think anyone looks older, like in a shocking way, where the actors seem ageless. Time is not passing in their real lives somehow. And so when they keep talking about Don aging, I feel like I always thought Don was 40. He seemed 40 from the first season. He seems 40 to me now. I don't feel he's still so handsome. And so I did like seeing some character actually be affected by time. But then it was just like, let's go to Tyler
Even
Perry's
Henry
house.
has like a 6-pack.
Yeah, he's so handsome.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
totally.
Henry still looks good.
Good looking to pull off a show that's about everyone getting older.
It's fine because it's like a beautiful
Henry's already
show.
older looking with his frosty hair, but his body is like freaking good for that age.
And Roger looks amazing.
Yeah, Roger.
Because it's a beautiful show, and that's the whole point of it.
They're all good-looking people. I mean, they're all, they were cast in some ways to be good-looking.
I went back and watched an episode after this from the first season, and they don't look different. Like the actors do not change. Because normally, you go back and you're just like, oh, they did age, and I didn't realize it. They didn't age.
I mean, even in Sex and the City, they looked older.
Oh,
by the time
that is just like her face turns into a different person, like a
by the end,
mythical creature. But also, like Sopranos, like Tony ages. Like James Gandolfini gets heavy, and he, as each season passes, he gets so tired. He's just so tired, and the weight that he's carrying around with him, it's like embodied in his actual physical being, and his hair starts to like get thinner and thinner, and it's so interesting to watch. And Carmela ages, and I don't know how to fault the show for not casting actors who are
going to age,
who are
treating their bodies terribly,
smoking,
drinking,
and
I understand it's TV too, and you suspend disbelief, but I did kind of, if they're going to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, like.
Yeah. So before we close out, we got a question from the chat room. They want everybody on the panel, will Don cheat on Megan at any point during this season?
Oh, that was my question last week.
Yeah.
Because I don't.
It's such a Mad Men standard.
That you say yes. I mean, you said yes last week.
I said yes last week.
So you're saying yes. I'm in the I don't know category because I feel like his compulsion, his sexual compulsion, seems so fixated on Megan this season.
I think he's already making excuses though of why he does. Why there's problems with her.
There was a teaser though.
Yeah.
Well, and
the teaser.
He gets and it's because of the Rolling Stones, but he does give that young girl his business card. And is that going to at some point come back?
Oh, that would be scandalous.
Is that going to come back? Well, maybe even if they don't get together, but will she call him? Will she show up at the office?
He almost hit on Anna's niece, remember California Dawn? Stephanie, who is a really pretty actress, but she's like a college girl, like a co-ed, and he had no problem getting all up on that.
And notably when he was talking to this girl at the concert in this episode, he's using it as it's like a focus group. Like, well, how do you feel when you listen to the Rolling Stones? And he sort of wasn't doing his usual.
But he's always cool Don. Like he always is. Like I know. Like, and I think that was intentional. He is always is obviously cooler than Harry. And that girl's obviously the other girl's making fun of Harry, and this girl's drawn to Don. I think there's a whole. I mean, Megan could also leave him. I feel like this season, even more than all the others, I'm so intrigued by what's going to happen, because right now, it's been the same thing. Like they're just saying, time marches on, we're all going to die. It's horrible. Like life's horrible. It's like how they're going to figure out how to make that.
It's going to have to get
us.
Chaotic and eventful again at some point for sure. I think we'll see this girl again.
Well,
they wouldn't have made such a big point.
I don't think we're going to see her again.
I don't think they would have made such a big point of the business card exchange unless they were setting up that she's going to... It's the same thing with the photo of Dolores that we were discussing last week, that Lane kept Dolores' photo. that you always figure they make such a point of showing you that they've kept it.
But then the girl didn't, like, would that girl be interested in Don? I think she thinks he's, like, over the hill.
Well, I mean, who knows why she'll even use the business card or show up. Maybe she'll think he can.
Why did he give her the card again?
She asked for it so she could try to weasel her way into the backstage
She thought
area.
if having a business card would make it easier for her to get backstage.
But I think Lee might never see Lane's girl again either. I feel like
you
that
may
could
not.
just be.
You may not.
I like the idea of them like just letting Lane have that in his wallet, and you just walk every time you see him. You're like, oh yeah, it's in his wallet, and this is like part of his background of his character now.
Yeah.
They don't always make those
they don't
things
know.
happen.
That's
like, there's
the
lots
one
of
thing that
stuff.
they're very good about is they don't necessarily, not everything is foreshadowed exactly.
Yeah.
So you never quite know if something's going to come back. Remember, last season, it's funny, we debated whether Abe would ever, after his first
Abe
appearance,
was there.
will Abe ever be back? Because they could have he was just some guy Peggy met at a
and
party.
And Abe's Jewish, right?
I believe
With a name like Abe, it's pretty likely.
I believe so.
No, you can go either way.
You could.
Definitely go either way.
I don't know.
But now Peggy's going to dump Abe from Michael.
Be upset.
Jump Jews.
I think she's going to
She's
jump
just going to Jew jump.
Poor Abe, he's so cute, but Michael's cute too.
Michael's cute. I think there's
Michael's
there's a
definitely
lot
there to
of,
be
there's a
her
lot of
foil.
chemistry between Peggy and Michael.
I did love that scene when she was hiring him and I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, oh my God, he's like a hot mess in the genuine way, you know?
Yeah.
Well, here are we. Are we at our...
I think we got to wrap it up.
Our
We've been an
endpoint?
hour and 15, which is a little long for us.
We did it long.
Longer than last week, which was 2 episodes to discuss. So obviously, Fat Betty had some interest for people. So thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back next Monday, as always, 7 p.m. live. 10 p.m. if you're on the East Coast. Thanks to the entire panel, Jamie and Janie and Starlee. A lot of E endings. I'm Lon Harris. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on This Week in Mad Men.